He probably gave me a lot of good advice, which I'd be hard-pressed to remember. But the first thing that comes to mind, actually, it was often just his way of scolding. I can remember very clearly him saying to me, "Stop showing off." So I tried to stop showing off. I met Geshe Tegchok in 78 at Manjushri Institute. I remember first seeing him. He pulled up in a car. There was a bunch of us there waiting to meet him, and he had these sunglasses, the ones that are like mirrors. He's wearing a pair of those, and he was quite portly. And he had the skirt up to about there. I think that was usually him. I can't really remember exactly how it happened, but I used to spend time with him quite a bit. Pretty well right from the beginning. So he came to teach what we called in those days the Geshe program. Those days, Lama had ideas of Western students becoming Geshe without having to learn Tibetan. So it's the Geshe program anyway. So yeah, he started teaching pretty soon after arriving. I was attending his classes. I remember I was in the office when Sera was on the phone before he came to Manjushri Institute. So Geshe Tegchok and Genkezang were in the office talking with him, and I found it a bit quite funny in a way that both of them were like this, bowing down. And I was thinking, but he's not here. He can't see you. But they were doing this, right? And then I remember one time at Nalanda, it was probably Geshe Tegchok, but I can't remember. It was probably Geshe Tegchok who was calling and talking with Geshe Tashi in our dining room. And he was doing the same thing, and I was making fun of him afterwards. But I also noticed that actually, when you're talking to one of your teachers, somebody in whose presence you would, definitely not, you would be sort of like sitting there with your legs stretched out, kind of, that kind of thing, There's a certain way that you would carry yourself when you're talking with them on the phone. It's the same, actually. You find yourself doing the same thing, Yes, that kind of thing. He was quite fierce. How I experienced him anyway. I can remember one time, I must have got upset and him scolding me about something. And he said, "Don't worry, we have a connection." Yeah, I don't know how that happened actually, because we used to talk quite a bit, but he didn't speak much English, and I certainly didn't speak Tibetan. But anyway, he communicated that. So then he was encouraging me to go to Sera. And he was giving me all sorts of advice on how to go about it, how to learn Tibetan and all that. So then once he was invited by Lama Yeshe to go to Nalanda, he said, "Forget about Sera, come with me to Nalanda." So of course, I did that. So he was teaching us for about 10 years, huge amount. Then he was appointed abbot of Sera, and I don't think we even discussed it. It was just obvious I was going to go with him. And so we traveled to Sera together. And so I was with him, until he left about 2004, 2005. So anyway, so he went a year later, but anyway, I went to Nalanda and he came a year later, and so we were still together a few years. And then after that, once he decided to leave the States to go to Italy, then I stayed behind and he went on by himself. because you need an Italian translator, not an English translator. Anyway, so I ended up saying Nalanda Buddhist. So yeah, it was quite amazing because what it comes down to is that I was with him, not constantly, but like kind of constantly from 1979 until 2008, and then it tapered off a bit, and then I saw him not long before he passed away in Sera. I can't remember what year that was, and maybe a year or two before he passed away. And he was just so really amazing. He was just so amazing. Great scholar, and very, very strong, down-to-earth practitioner. Really quite amazing. And so then as for what it was like as a Westerner to have your teacher as a Tibetan. I mean, when I started out, there almost was no such thing as Western teachers who had, students that they were guiding on the path. Maybe there are now. So it's just, that's all there was. And there were these old, in my world anyway, there were these old Tibetan Geshes. Anyway, for me they were old, like 40s onward, I was like old at that time. I was early 20s. I never really thought anything of him being Tibetan or different colours, skin and that kind of thing. That's odd really, I suppose. And I don't think I ever really thought to myself, oh, he's acting like that or talking like that because he's Tibetan, or treating me like that because he's Tibetan and I'm Western. So it reminds me that when I was at Sera, it's not like I thought I was Tibetan. It's not like I picked up some Tibetan habits, some natural food habits and things like that. But I guess in my room I didn't have a mirror, so like from one day to the next you don't see your face. So now and then I'd be at debate during the prayers and the so-called, dressed like this with your arm showing, and I would just now and then I would sort of notice my arm and I think, oh yeah, it's so much paler than there. The Tibetans around me. I think it was just not really something I was aware of. He was just like my teacher, and he taught, and he had some very good advice, very, very good life advice. It was a lot to do with like, it would be good to do this, it would be good to study this, it would be good to do this retreat because I'm going to be giving teachings on this and you'll need to have done the retreat, kind of thing. That kind of thing. So that kind of guidance. Yeah. So one time he was teaching at Vajrayogini Institute. He was teaching, I think he was teaching Nagarjuna's Precious Kalam, but anyway. So anyway, he was teaching at Vajrayogini Institute, and somehow, in a little way, just out of the blue, I think you know what I mean, it's like not particularly following the line of the teaching, but somehow he just mentioned, one of the Bodhisattva practices is if you find yourself in a very nice situation, very comfortable, beautiful situation, then you should make very strong determination. I'm going to stay here until I achieve enlightenment. In a way, I think that how that struck me at the time was, because not all Westerners, but there are many Westerners who think that, if you're a good practitioner, you shouldn't be in a comfortable situation. You shouldn't be comfortable. I think the more mature practitioners, friends of mine, they understand. So not like that, you have to be comfortable. Otherwise you're just miserable. If you're miserable, it's difficult to do anything, isn't it? But anyway, I thought about that when it came to living in Land of Medicine Buddha. It's a very beautiful center. The whole area, like 15, 20 minutes drive from the ocean. Not too hot, not too cold. The redwoods, I thought of that advice. You don't need to feel there's something wrong in being in this beautiful apartment and this beautiful place. So I remembered that advice there. And something he also said when he was at Nalanda Medicine Buddha. I've mentioned this to people before and they don't always get it, so I'm not sure people really get it, but he just said one day, he was teaching Bodhisattva, the guide to Bodhisattva's way of life, Shantideva, for sure. And he said, which one is the best practitioner? The one who stays with their mother to help instead of going off to do retreat or whatever, or the one who goes off to do retreat and study, meditate and all that, which is the best? And the way he asked it, it was clear that what he was telling us was, there's not so much to choose. Another way of saying it is, if you've got a choice between offering service and meditating, practicing, there's not a clear-cut choice. It's not like, oh, of course, you have to go off into the mountains to retreat and meditate. It could be the best thing is to, to forego all that and stay and be there with people and tell them and so on. I mean, I'm not saying that's what I do, but I'm saying that was what I took from it.